I want to tell you about the most dangerous lie you were ever taught. It's the belief that you must hold on tight to everything you have, that letting go means losing, that emptiness is the enemy. But here's the truth that changed everything for me, and it will change everything for you too. Before a single beautiful thing can enter your life, you must first create space for it. You must become empty. You must learn what I call the vacuum law of prosperity. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to share flies in the face of everything your fear has told you. Every person who has ever achieved remarkable success, every individual who has manifested abundance beyond their wildest dreams, every soul who has experienced profound transformation understood this one sacred principle. You cannot pour fresh water into a cup that's already full. You cannot plant new seeds in soil that's choked with weeds. And you cannot receive the magnificent gifts the universe is desperate to give you when your hands are clenched around things that no longer serve you. I discovered this truth not in a moment of triumph, but in a moment of absolute devastation. There I was, holding on to a relationship that had died years before, clinging to beliefs about myself that were nothing but lies, gripping tightly to possessions I thought defined my worth, and wondering why my prayers seemed to bounce off the ceiling. I was suffocating under the weight of everything I refused to release, and I called it security. I called it wisdom. I called it being practical, but it was none of those things. It was fear wearing a very convincing disguise. The universe operates on a principle that most people never understand until it's too late. Nature abhors a vacuum. When you create empty space, the universe rushes in to fill it. When you finally release what's poisoning you, something beautiful has room to grow. When you let go of the old, the new can finally arrive. This isn't just philosophy. This isn't just spiritual poetry. This is a law as reliable as gravity, and it's been working in your life, whether you knew it or not. Think about your own breath for just a moment. You cannot inhale new air until you exhale the old. You cannot fill your lungs with fresh, life-giving oxygen while holding on to carbon dioxide. The very act of living requires you to let go constantly, rhythmically, trustingly. Your body knows this wisdom even when your mind has forgotten it. Your heart understands this truth even when your ego fights against it. But somewhere along the way, you learned to hold your breath. You learned to grip tighter when you should release. You learned that letting go meant losing, when in fact, letting go is the only way to truly gain. And now you're standing at the edge of your own transformation, wondering why the door to your dreams stays locked, not realizing that you're the one blocking it from the inside with all the furniture of your past. You see, the subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what hurts you and what helps you. It simply accepts what you repeatedly feed it. If you've been feeding it a steady diet of "I must control everything or chaos will reign," then your subconscious will dutifully ensure you remain in a constant state of vigilance, exhaustion, and resistance. It will create circumstances that seem to validate your fears, not because the universe is against you, but because your mind is simply fulfilling the blueprint you've given it. Think about the person who says they want love but unconsciously believes they're unworthy of it. What happens? They attract people who confirm that belief. They sabotage healthy relationships. They create tests that no partner could possibly pass. And when it all falls apart, they say, "See, I knew I couldn't have it." The subconscious just delivered exactly what was ordered. This is why affirmations alone often fail. You can stand in front of a mirror and declare, "I am abundant," 1,000 times. But if your deeper programming is running a script that says money is the root of all evil or rich people are greedy, then you're essentially trying to drive north and south simultaneously. The subconscious will win every time because it operates from a deeper, more primal place than your conscious intentions. The real work isn't in adding more positive thoughts on top of negative beliefs. It's in excavating those buried programs and bringing them into the light where they lose their power. It's in recognizing that the stories you tell yourself about control, about worthiness, about what's possible aren't facts, they're just stories, and stories can be rewritten. But here's where most people stumble. They want to rewrite the story while still clinging to the old narrative. They want transformation without surrender. They want the caterpillar to become a butterfly while refusing to enter the chrysalis. They want the old self and the new self to somehow coexist, not understanding that metamorphosis requires a complete dissolution of what was. I see this pattern everywhere. The person who prays for prosperity but refuses to see themselves as prosperous. Who asks for abundance while clinging to the identity of lack. who begs for healing while nursing their wounds like precious possessions. There's a psychological mechanism at work here that most people never recognize. Your subconscious mind is extraordinarily loyal. It will defend your self-concept with the same ferocity that your immune system defends your body against foreign invaders. When you try to introduce a new belief that contradicts your fundamental sense of who you are, your subconscious doesn't say, "Oh, how wonderful, a new upgrade." It says, "This is a threat. This must be rejected." This is why affirmations often fail. Not because affirmations don't work, they absolutely do, but because people use them like band-aids on bullet wounds. They stand in front of the mirror saying, "I am confident," while every fiber of their being screams, "No, you're not." They declare, "I am wealthy," while their entire inner world is organized around the experience of poverty. The affirmation bounces off the armored walls of their self-concept like a rubber ball against concrete. The real work isn't in the affirmation. The real work is in the dying, the letting go, the release of the old identity that contradicts what you're trying to become. Think of it this way. Your self-concept is like the operating system of a computer. Your thoughts, behaviors, and experiences are the programs running on that system. You can't install a program designed for a completely different operating system and expect it to run smoothly. First, you need to upgrade the operating system itself. You need to fundamentally rewire the core identity. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. This rewiring feels like death because, in a very real sense, it is death. The death of who you believed yourself to be. The death of familiar patterns, even painful ones. The death of the stories you've told yourself for years, perhaps decades, about why things are the way they are. Most people approach this threshold and retreat. They feel the discomfort of change and interpret it as a sign they're doing something wrong. But you're not most people. If you're still here, if you've made it this far in this conversation, you understand something profound. Discomfort is not a warning sign. It's a directional sign. It's pointing you exactly where you need to go. Think about a butterfly in its chrysalis. There's a moment during metamorphosis when the creature is neither caterpillar nor butterfly. It's liquid. It's formless. Scientists call this imaginal cells stage. The old structure has dissolved, and the new structure hasn't yet solidified. If you could speak to that consciousness in that moment, it would probably feel like death. Everything it knew itself to be has liquefied. But that's not death. That's transformation at the cellular level. You're in your chrysalis right now. The old identity is dissolving. The stories that seem so solid, so permanent, so definitively you are revealing themselves to be temporary structures. And yes, this feels vulnerable. It feels scary. You might wake up at 3 in the morning wondering who you'll be without your familiar suffering. Let me tell you who you'll be. You'll be free. But freedom isn't what most people think it is. We imagine freedom as this euphoric state of constant joy and ease. That's not freedom. That's fantasy. Real freedom is the capacity to feel everything without being destroyed by anything. It's the ability to watch a thought arise without becoming that thought. To feel an emotion without identifying as that emotion. The subconscious mind you've been feeding for all these years doesn't understand this kind of freedom. It understands patterns, repetition, the familiar. When you begin to interrupt those patterns, when you refuse to repeat the old scripts, your subconscious essentially says, "Wait, who's in charge here? We've always done it this way." And you get to answer, "There's a new authority now. Consciousness is in charge. Awareness is driving. And we're going somewhere completely different." This answer isn't always comfortable. Your body might resist. You might experience what psychologists call extinction burst. Things might actually seem to get worse before they get better. The old patterns throw everything they have at you in a last-ditch effort to reassert control. This is where most people break. They say, "See? I tried that positive thinking stuff and everything fell apart. It doesn't work." But everything falling apart is exactly what's supposed to happen. You're not failing. You're succeeding so dramatically that the old structure can't sustain itself anymore. Think of it like this. You decide you're going to become someone who runs marathons. Not just tries running, someone who times is times a runner at their core. You make that decision with absolute conviction. What happens next? You wake up the next morning and your alarm goes off at 5 a.m. It's dark. It's cold. Your bed has never felt more comfortable in your entire life. Every cell in your body screams to stay under the covers. That's the earthquake. Your friends invite you out for drinks on a Friday night. You know you have a long run scheduled for Saturday morning. You want to go. You want to be spontaneous. You want to be the person you've always been. That's the structure cracking. You look in the mirror after 2 weeks, and you don't see a runner. You see the same person you've always been, slightly more tired, slightly more sore. The evidence your senses provide contradicts everything you've claimed about yourself. That's the collapse. Most people interpret these moments as proof that their decision didn't work. They think, see, I'm not a runner. I was fooling myself. This isn't who I am. But that's not what's happening at all. What's actually happening is the old version of you, the one who sleeps in, who says yes to every invitation, who identifies as not athletic, is fighting for survival. And it fights dirty. It uses your own nervous system against you. It floods you with discomfort, doubt, and contradictory evidence. It has to. Because a decision made with conviction isn't a wish or a hope or a try, it's a reorganization of reality itself at the level of consciousness. And when consciousness reorganizes, everything built on the old organization has to crumble. The confusion comes from thinking the crumbling is the problem. It's not. The crumbling is the times process asterisk. It's how transformation actually works in the three-dimensional world. You don't get to become new while everything old stays comfortable and intact. The person who succeeds isn't the one who avoids the collapse. It's the one who understands what the collapse means. When your alarm goes off and every fiber of your being resists, the person who becomes a runner recognizes, this resistance isn't evidence that I'm not a runner. This resistance is evidence that I'm becoming one. The old me is dissolving. This discomfort is progress. That shift in interpretation changes everything. Think of a seed buried in soil. In darkness, under pressure, it doesn't say, something's wrong with me. It doesn't resist the confinement. It knows, instinctively, that this stage is necessary. The breaking open of the shell isn't failure, it's germination. You're germinating right now. Every time you feel that inner friction, you're at a choice point. You can interpret it as evidence that you're broken, that the process isn't working, that you should give up. Or you can interpret it as evidence that transformation is happening, that old structures are loosening, that you're right on schedule. The interpretation you choose becomes your reality. Now, here's something most people miss entirely. The subconscious doesn't just resist the new state, it sometimes tests your commitment to it. It throws up what I call verification scenarios. Situations that seem designed to prove your old story true. You're affirming abundance, and suddenly an unexpected bill arrives. You're claiming confidence, and you encounter someone who tries to diminish you. You're building belief in your worth, and you face rejection. These aren't signs you're doing it wrong. They're the final exams before graduation. The old consciousness, sensing its dissolution, creates one more scene that matches its frequency. It's asking, are you sure? Are you really choosing the new state? Or will you come back to me when things get uncomfortable? Most people fail this test without realizing it's a test. They see the contradictory evidence and think, see, I knew this wouldn't work. I knew I couldn't have that. Reality is proving me right. But what they don't understand is that this evidence is an echo, not a prophecy. It's the remnant of yesterday's state, not a message about tomorrow's reality. When you stay faithful to your new assumption despite contrary evidence, you pass through a threshold. You prove to your deeper self that you're serious, that you're not just casually wishing, you're actually choosing a new identity. And here's what happens next. The external world has no choice but to reorganize itself around your inner conviction. I'm not speaking metaphorically. I mean this with absolute precision. Your sustained assumption creates a vibrational template, and reality, which is far more malleable than you've been taught, molds itself to match that template. Now, let me address the elephant in the room, the question that's probably forming in your mind right now. If this is so simple, if it's just about sustained assumption, why doesn't everyone live their ideal life? Why is there so much struggle? The answer is brutally honest. Because most people don't actually sustain their assumptions. They sample them. They taste them like a curious child with a new food, then spit them out the moment resistance appears. You decide you're wealthy. You hold that assumption for 3 minutes. Then you check your bank account, see the same number you saw yesterday, and immediately collapse back into I'm struggling financially. You've just canceled your own order with the universe. It's like planting a seed, then digging it up every day to see if it's growing. The seed needs undisturbed soil to take root. Your assumption needs undisturbed consciousness to manifest. Here's what actually happens in most people's inner world. They ping-pong between contradictory states. I am successful, but look at my current circumstances. I am successful, but what if it doesn't work? I am successful, but I've failed before. This isn't assumption. This is mental chaos. The subconscious mind doesn't respond to your occasional positive thought. It responds to your dominant, habitual mental attitude. It's listening to the song you play on repeat, not the one you hum once in the shower. Think of your consciousness as a radio transmitter. Whatever frequency you consistently broadcast is what you'll receive back. But if you keep switching stations every few minutes, you get static. Just noise, just confusion. Just more of the same mixed results you've always gotten. This is why I emphasize persistence. Not blind, desperate persistence, but calm, assured persistence. The kind of persistence that comes from understanding how this works, not from hoping it might work. When you truly understand that your assumption is creative, you relax into it. You don't grip it with white knuckles. You wear it like a comfortable garment. You live from it, not toward it. This is why so many people who finally achieve their goals feel empty afterward. They spent years living times toward times something, and when they arrived, they didn't know how to live times from times it. The achievement was supposed to change them, but they never changed their inner state to match the achievement first. Listen carefully. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vivid mental image and reality. When you consistently imagine yourself as already successful, already healed, already prosperous, your subconscious accepts this as fact. It then begins to reorganize your entire life to match this inner conviction. This isn't fantasy. This is how your mind works. The man who sees himself as chronically ill will unconsciously sabotage his own recovery. He'll forget to take his medication. He'll ignore the doctor's advice. He'll surround himself with others who reinforce his identity as a sick person, not because he wants to suffer, but because his subconscious is simply being consistent with his self-image. But the person who, despite current symptoms, holds an unwavering mental image of perfect health, activates entirely different forces. Their body begins to respond. Their choices align. They attract information, people, and circumstances that support healing. The subconscious mind is the master chemist, and it begins producing the internal conditions that match the mental image. I've seen this countless times. A woman came to me once, struggling financially for years. She prayed, she worked hard, nothing changed. I asked her a simple question. When you think about money, what do you feel? She paused, then quietly admitted, fear, anxiety, like it's always slipping through my fingers. There was her answer. Her subconscious was faithfully creating experiences that matched her inner feeling about money. She was living times from times a consciousness of lack, so lack was all she could attract. We worked together to change this, not through more effort, but through a systematic reconditioning of her inner world. She began to feel grateful for the money she had. She imagined her bank account growing. She practiced the feeling of financial security until it became natural, effortless, real. Within months, everything shifted. A forgotten investment paid out. A new job opportunity appeared. Her entire financial reality reorganized itself to match her new inner state. This is the law. It works with mathematical precision. The question most people ask at this point is, but how long will it take? And I understand that question. We live in a world of deadlines and schedules. We want to know when the check will arrive, when the relationship will manifest, when the healing will occur. But here's what you must understand. Time, as you experience it, is a construct of your conscious mind. Your subconscious mind exists in an eternal now. It doesn't recognize 3 weeks from Tuesday or 6 months from now. It only knows the state you're impressing upon it right now, in this present moment. When you ask, how long will it take, you're actually affirming separation. You're declaring that what you desire is not here yet, that it exists somewhere in the future, beyond your reach. And your subconscious, ever faithful, says yes, it is beyond your reach, and perpetuates that reality. I've watched this pattern destroy more manifestations than perhaps any other single mistake. People do the work. They visualize, they affirm, they feel, and then they constantly check their watch. Has it happened yet? Why isn't it here? It's been 2 weeks. Each time they do this, they're impressing lack upon their subconscious. They're watering the weed instead of the flower. There was a man I worked with who wanted to manifest a specific position in his company. He did everything correctly for exactly 5 days. His visualization was clear, his feeling was genuine, his faith was strong, and then on day 6, he started counting. It's been almost a week and nothing's happened. Day 7, still nothing. Day 8, maybe this doesn't work after all. By day 10, he'd completely undermined his own work, not because the law had failed, but because he kept pulling up the seed to see if it was growing. Compare this to another individual who came to me with a seemingly impossible request. She needed $20,000 within a month to save her home from foreclosure. A desperate situation by any measure. But here's what she did differently, she decided. Not hoped, not wished, not tried, she decided that the money was already hers. She spent 20 minutes each night before sleep feeling the relief, the gratitude, the security of having that mortgage paid. And then, and this is crucial, she let it go. She stopped checking. She stopped worrying. She went about her days with a quiet inner knowing. 3 weeks later, an insurance policy she'd forgotten about from 15 years ago matured. $22,000. The exact amount she needed, plus a little extra. She called me in tears. But this time, they were different tears. "Dr. Murphy," she said, "I thought I was lying to myself. I thought I was just pretending, but I wasn't pretending at all. I was remembering forward. Remembering forward. I've never heard it put more beautifully. See, when you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you're not being dishonest with yourself. You're not engaged in some childish game of make-believe. You're actually aligning yourself with a reality that already exists in the infinite storehouse of possibilities. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a so-called real one. The emotional impact is identical. The neural pathways that form are the same. And once those pathways are established, your subconscious begins to orchestrate circumstances, to arrange events, to magnetize opportunities that correspond to that inner pattern. This is why gratitude is so powerful. Not gratitude for what you hope to receive, but gratitude for what you claim to already possess in consciousness. Let me give you another example. A man came to one of my lectures in Los Angeles, years ago. He was a writer, talented but completely unknown. He'd been submitting manuscripts for 8 years with nothing but rejection letters to show for it. "Dr. Murphy," he asked me after the lecture, "how can I feel grateful for success I haven't experienced? Isn't that just lying?" I told him what I'm telling you now. You're not lying, you're selecting. Of all the infinite possibilities available to you at this very moment, you're simply choosing which one to activate through your feeling and attention. I suggested he spend 10 minutes every night before sleep feeling exactly as he would feel if he received a letter of acceptance from a major publisher. Not visualizing the letter itself, mind you, but saturating himself in the feeling, the relief, the validation, the quiet joy, the sense of rightness, of timing, of everything finally clicking into place. That's the truth you can't buy, can't fake, can't manifest through sheer force of will. It comes from alignment. From knowing yourself so deeply that when something is wrong, your entire system rebels. And when something is right, every cell in your body says times yes, asterisk. I've seen people stay in relationships for years because they were comfortable, because the person was kind, because on paper, it made sense. But inside, there was a constant hum of dissonance, a low-grade anxiety they couldn't name. They'd wake up feeling heavy, they'd look at their partner and feel nothing. Or worse, they'd feel trapped. And they'd tell themselves stories. Maybe I'm too picky, maybe this is as good as it gets. Maybe I just need to work harder at loving them. But here's what I know. You don't have to work at loving the right person. You work times with them, sure. You grow together, you face challenges, but the love itself, that should feel like the most natural thing in the world. When you're with the right person, silence isn't awkward, touch isn't forced, laughter isn't performed. You don't rehearse conversations in your head before you have them. You don't walk on eggshells. You don't wonder if you're too much or not enough. You just are. And they see you, really see you. Not the version of you that you've carefully curated for public consumption. Not the highlight reel. They see your mess, your contradictions, your 3 a.m. fears, your petty irritations, and they don't run. They don't try to fix you. They just stay. That's the thing nobody tells you. The right person doesn't complete you. They don't fill some void. They don't solve all your problems or erase your past. What they do is witness you. They hold space for all of who you are, the brilliant and the broken, the brave and the terrified, and they choose you anyway. Not because they're settling, not because they think they can change you, but because when they look at you, something in them recognizes something in you, a frequency, a resonance, a knowing that defies logic. I remember a woman who came to one of my talks. She'd been with her boyfriend for 6 years. Everyone expected them to get married. Her family loved him. Her friends thought he was perfect, but she couldn't pull the trigger. She couldn't say yes. And she felt guilty about it, ashamed. She asked me, "How do I know if I'm self-sabotaging or if this just isn't right?" I asked her one question. When you imagine your life in 10 years, and he's in it, what do you feel? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said very softly, "Resigned." That word hit me like a cold wind. Resigned. Not hopeful, not excited, not peaceful. Resigned? That's the feeling of someone who's given up on joy. Someone who's convinced themselves that settling is the same thing as maturity, that lowering your standards is the same thing as being realistic. And I want to tell you something right now, something that might sting a little. If the thought of your future with someone makes you feel times resigned asterisk, that's not self-sabotage. That's your soul screaming at you to wake up. You see, there's a profound difference between fear of intimacy and intuition warning you that something fundamental is missing. Fear makes you want to run when things get close. Intuition makes you realize you've been running times toward times the wrong thing all along. I told her, "You're not afraid of commitment. You're grieving the version of this relationship you hoped would eventually show up." She started crying then. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, relieved kind. The kind that comes when someone finally gives you permission to trust yourself. Because that's what we need sometimes. Permission. Permission to admit that someone can be kind, stable, and absolutely wrong for us. Permission to acknowledge that we're not broken just because we want more than fine. Permission to leave before we've collected enough evidence to justify it to everyone else. Now, I want you to think about your own life for a moment. Are there areas where you've become times resigned asterisk? A job that's slowly draining you, but hey, at least it's stable? A friendship that feels one-sided, but you've known them so long? A living situation that makes you feel trapped, but moving seems too hard? Resignation is a slow poison. It doesn't kill you all at once. It just makes you smaller and smaller until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. I've watched this happen to people I've counseled. They come to me with dreams that have grown dim, with hopes they've learned to muffle. And when I ask them what happened, they rarely blame circumstances. They blame themselves. They've accepted a story about who they are that simply isn't true. But here's what resignation doesn't want you to know. You are not fixed. You are not finished. The life you're living right now is not a sentence, it's a chapter, and chapters can change. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a limitation that's real and one that you've simply accepted as real. It responds to what you consistently tell it. When you say, "This is just how I am," your subconscious says, "Understood," and makes it so. When you say, "I can never," your subconscious builds walls where none existed before. This is why resignation is so dangerous. It's not just an attitude, it's a creative force. You are literally using the most powerful tool in the universe, your imagination, to reinforce your own imprisonment. Think about that. The same mind that could be building bridges is building barriers. The same creative power that could be opening doors is sealing them shut. You're not lacking power, you're using your power against yourself. I want you to understand something crucial. Every single time you resign yourself to less, you are making a choice. It doesn't feel like a choice because you've made it so many times that it's become automatic, but it is a choice nonetheless. You choose resignation when you say, "I'm too old." You choose it when you say, "I don't have the connections." You choose it when you say, "People like me don't get those opportunities." These aren't observations. They're not coming. Decisions. Decisions to stop trying. Decisions to stop believing. Decisions to stop becoming. And the tragedy is that these decisions are based on false evidence. You're not too old, you're exactly the right age to begin again. You do have connections, they're called people. and you meet them every day. And there are no people like you because there is only you, unique and unprecedented, carrying possibilities that have never existed before. The path out of resignation begins with a simple recognition. This feeling is not truth. It's habit. And habits can be broken. What would happen if you started questioning your own resignation? What if, every time you catch yourself saying, "I can't," you pause and ask, "Is that really true? Or is that just familiar?" Because I promise you, most of the limitations you've accepted are nothing more than echoes of old fears, repeated so often they sound like wisdom. Let me tell you something that most people never realize. Your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between a real limitation and an imagined one. It treats both exactly the same. When you say, "I'm not good with money," your subconscious accepts that as fact and begins organizing your entire life around that belief. It filters opportunities, guides your decisions, even influences how you feel when financial situations arise. But here's what changes everything. That same subconscious mind is equally obedient when you feed it a different story. It doesn't argue. It doesn't fact check. It simply accepts what you consistently tell it and goes to work making it real. I've watched people transform their entire financial reality not by learning complex strategies or working twice as hard, but by changing the conversation they have with themselves. One woman came to me convinced she was destined to struggle. Her parents struggled. Her grandparents struggled. She had decades of evidence that she just wasn't meant for prosperity. But we started simple. Every morning and every night, she would say with feeling, "Money flows to me easily and naturally." That's it. No complicated affirmations, no vision boards. Just that one statement, repeated with conviction. 3 months later, she received an unexpected job offer with double her previous salary. 6 months after that, she paid off debt she thought would follow her to the grave. Was it magic? No. It was her subconscious mind, finally freed from the limitations she'd been programming into it her entire life, going to work on her behalf. You see, your mind is always working, always creating, always manifesting something. The only question is whether you're directing it consciously or letting it run on autopilot, replaying the same tired scripts from your past. Most people never pause long enough to realize they've been operating the most sophisticated creative technology in the universe with about as much awareness as a child randomly pressing buttons on a supercomputer. You wouldn't drive a car blindfolded, would you? Yet that's exactly what you're doing with your subconscious mind every single day. Racing forward at full speed with no clear destination, wondering why you keep ending up in the same ditch. Here's what I need you to understand right now. Every thought you think is a seed planted in the fertile soil of your subconscious. Every single one. And your subconscious doesn't judge whether that seed is good or bad, empowering or destructive. It simply accepts it, waters it, and grows it into your physical reality. Think about that for a moment. Really let it sink in. When you think, "I'm always broke," your subconscious says, "Understood." Broke it is. When you think, "People always let me down," your subconscious arranges your experiences to confirm that belief. When you tell yourself, "I'm not good enough," your brilliant, obedient subconscious mind makes absolutely certain you're not good enough. It's not being cruel, it's being faithful. Perfectly, precisely faithful to the instructions you're giving it. This is why affirmations work when done correctly, and why they fail miserably when people approach them with doubt. You can't say, "I am prosperous," while feeling poor and expect miracles. Your subconscious isn't fooled by words alone. It responds to the feeling, the conviction, the assumed reality behind those words. You must feel prosperous while declaring prosperity. You must embody health while affirming health. You must become, in consciousness, what you wish to be in reality. This isn't pretending. This is pretending. You're tending to the harvest before it arrives. You're preparing the container before the blessing pours in. You see, the woman who wants to be married doesn't wait until the wedding day to cultivate the consciousness of being a wife. She begins now. She makes space in her closet. She clears out the side of the bed. She sets 2 places at the table, even when dining alone. Not from loneliness, from knowing. She is training her subconscious mind to accept the reality of partnership before it manifests in the physical world. This isn't foolishness. This is wisdom. The man who desires prosperity doesn't wait until the check clears to feel abundant. He walks with the posture of wealth now. He tips generously from little. He speaks words of plenty, not scarcity. He thanks the universe for riches that are, in this very moment, making their way to him through channels he cannot yet see. You must understand your subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. This is not poetry. This is neuroscience. This is how your mind works. When you close your eyes and feel the joy of your wish fulfilled, your subconscious accepts it as fact. It then goes to work, silently and intelligently, rearranging your inner world. And your inner world creates your outer world. Always. Without exception. So I ask you, what are you pretending to right now? Are you pretending to failure? Are you rehearsing disappointment? Are you setting the table for lack? Or are you pretending to your harvest? Let me tell you about a man I once counseled. He came to me defeated. His business had failed. His savings were gone. He told me, Dr. Murphy, I've lost everything. I don't know how I'll recover. I said to him, you've lost nothing but an old idea of yourself. And that's the best thing that could have happened. He looked at me like I'd gone mad. I continued, right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can tend to the garden of defeat, or you can tend to the garden of resurrection. Which will you water with your attention? I taught him this principle of pretending. Every morning, before rising, he would lie in bed and feel what it would be like to be successful again. Not imagine it as a distant dream, but times it as a present fact. He would say, I am surrounded by right action. Infinite intelligence guides me. Prosperity flows to me now. Within 6 months, opportunities appeared that he could never have predicted. A former colleague reached out with a partnership proposal. A skill set he'd developed years earlier suddenly became valuable in a new market. Money arrived from unexpected sources. The universe doesn't care about your timeline. It cares about your readiness. And sometimes, readiness means letting go of the white-knuckled grip you've had on how things should happen. I've seen people manifest their desires the moment they stopped obsessing over the lack. There's a man I knew who spent 2 years desperately seeking a romantic partner. Every date felt like an audition. Every conversation carried the weight of his loneliness, and nothing materialized. Then, something shifted. He started focusing on becoming the person he wanted to attract. He joined a pottery class not to meet someone, but because he'd always been curious about it. He volunteered at an animal shelter. He read books that expanded his thinking. He laughed more easily. Within 3 months, he met someone at a friend's dinner party. Not because he was trying, because he was ready. This is the paradox that confounds the logical mind. The moment you stop needing it desperately is often the moment it arrives. Not because the universe is playing games with you, but because desperation is a frequency that repels. Confidence and inner fulfillment attract. Your subconscious mind is always listening to the dominant feeling behind your words. You can say affirmations all day long, but if the underlying feeling is, I don't have this and I'm afraid I never will, that's what gets impressed upon your deeper mind. That's what manifests. The feeling is the secret, not the words, not the visualization alone. The feeling that accompanies your mental imagery is what breathes life into it. When you can generate the feeling of the wish fulfilled, when you can rest in that feeling without anxiety about the how or when, you've activated the creative power within you. Think of it this way. Your subconscious mind is like soil. Whatever seed you plant consistently will grow. If you plant seeds of lack while occasionally tossing in seeds of abundance, what do you think will dominate your garden? The soil doesn't judge. It doesn't say, this is a good seed and this is a bad seed. It simply produces after its kind. You are the gardener. You choose what to plant, and the planting happens primarily through the feelings and beliefs you entertain habitually. Not once in a while, habitually. Your subconscious doesn't care what you plant. It will return what you give it. Plant fear, you harvest fear. Plant doubt, you harvest doubt. Plant confidence, you harvest confidence. It's that simple, and it's that profound. Now, many people say to me, but Dr. Murphy, I've tried to think positively. I've tried affirmations. They don't work for me. And I always ask the same question. How long did you persist? How deeply did you feel what you were affirming? Because you see, it's not about the words themselves. The words are merely vehicles. It's the feeling, the conviction, the emotional acceptance behind those words that does the work. You can stand in front of a mirror and repeat, I am prosperous 1,000 times. But if deep down you feel poor, if you look at your bank account and panic, if you resent those who have more than you, your subconscious is receiving a very different message. And it's that deeper message, that habitual feeling tone, that your subconscious acts upon. This is why I emphasize the state of consciousness you maintain throughout your day. What are you predominantly feeling? What thoughts do you return to again and again? These habitual mental patterns are the seeds you're constantly planting. Let me give you a practical illustration. Suppose you want to improve your health. You can affirm, "I am healthy and strong," morning and night. That's good. But if during the day you constantly worry about symptoms, if you talk endlessly about your ailments, if you identify yourself as a sick person, you're watering the wrong seeds. You're cultivating illness while paying lip service to health. The solution? You must live from the end. You must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. What would it feel like to be perfectly healthy? How would you walk? How would you talk about yourself? How would you feel when you wake up in the morning? Capture that feeling. Live in that feeling. Make it habitual. This is not pretending. This is not denial of current facts. This is working with the law. You're consciously choosing what to plant in your subconscious garden. And remember, your subconscious cannot tell the difference between a real experience and one vividly imagined with feeling. To your subconscious, if you feel it, it's real. This is why visualization isn't just daydreaming, it's the architect's blueprint for your future. When you sit quietly and imagine yourself living in that new home, feeling the textures, smelling the fresh air, hearing the sounds of your ideal environment, you're not escaping reality. You're creating it. I've seen this principle work miracles in people's lives. There was a woman who came to one of my lectures years ago. She was struggling financially, working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. She felt trapped, exhausted, defeated. I taught her this simple technique. Every night before sleep, spend 10 minutes feeling what it would be like to have financial freedom, not just thinking about money, but feeling the relief, the peace, the security. She did this faithfully. Within 3 months, an opportunity came through a casual conversation at her workplace. Someone mentioned a position at another company. She applied, though she thought she was underqualified. But something had shifted in her. Her confidence was different. Her energy had changed. She got the position, and it paid more than both her previous jobs combined. Now, was it magic? No. Was it coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences when it comes to the subconscious mind. What happened was this. By impressing her subconscious with the feeling of financial security, she changed her vibration, her awareness, her actions. She became receptive to opportunities she might have previously overlooked. She carried herself differently in that interview. Her subconscious mind had accepted the new impression, and it began to orchestrate circumstances to match. This is the law in action. Your subconscious is always working to bring your dominant mental state into physical manifestation. Always. It never stops. It doesn't take vacations. Right now, at this very moment, it's working on your behalf or against you depending on what you've been feeding it. So here's what I want you to understand deeply. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are not at the mercy of the economy, your past, your family history, or your current situation. You are the creative power in your own life. You have within you, right now, the same power that creates worlds. This power is not selective. It does not choose some and reject others. It flows equally to all who align themselves with it through belief. The question is never whether the power is available, it always is. The question is whether you are opening yourself to receive it. Think of it this way. The sun shines on everyone. It does not decide that one person deserves warmth and another deserves cold. But if you close your curtains, if you lock yourself in a dark room, you will not experience the light. The sun is still there. The warmth is still available, but you have blocked yourself from receiving it. Your subconscious mind is like those curtains. When you fill it with beliefs of limitation, lack, and impossibility, you close yourself off from the infinite supply. When you open it with faith, with acceptance, with the feeling of your wish fulfilled, you allow the light to pour in. I want you to understand something profound. You are not asking for something outside of you to change. You are not begging the universe to make an exception for you. You are simply claiming what is already yours by divine right. You are accepting the gift that has always been waiting for you. Every desire that arises within you comes with its own fulfillment already attached. Desire and fulfillment are two ends of the same thing. When you desire wealth, the wealth already exists. When you desire healing, the healing already exists. When you desire love, the love already exists. Your job is not to create these things, they are already created. Your job is to accept them, to feel them as real, to impress upon your subconscious mind the reality of their existence in your life. This is why I say to you, stop fighting, stop struggling, stop trying to make things happen through force and effort alone. Instead, go within, enter the silence, feel the reality of your desire as already accomplished, live from that end, and watch as the outer world rearranges itself to match the inner conviction. You have spent so long looking at your external circumstances for evidence of what is possible. You have let the facts of your current reality dictate what you believe. But I am telling you to reverse this entirely. Let your belief dictate your reality. Let your inner conviction become the fact that manifests outwardly. This is not denial of what is. This is creation of what will be. The mind does not argue with you. It accepts what you accept. If you say, I am struggling, it says, yes, you are struggling. If you say, I am prosperous, it says, yes, you are prosperous. The subconscious mind is impersonal. It is like the soil that accepts any seed you plant, whether rose or thorn, it grows what you give it. This is why your habitual thinking is so crucial. What seeds are you planting day after day? What mental images do you return to in moments of quiet? What do you affirm when no one is listening? These are the blueprints that your deeper mind is working from continuously, tirelessly, without pause. I have seen people change their entire financial situation by changing a single belief, not by working harder, not by getting more education, by changing the inner conviction about what they deserved and what was possible for them. One man I knew was stuck at a certain income level for years. He worked diligently, he was skilled, but something invisible held him back. When we explored his thinking, we found it. He believed that people like him, from his background, didn't make more than a certain amount. It was a ceiling he had built in his own mind. Once he saw this belief clearly, he began to dismantle it. He replaced it with a new conviction. My income reflects my value, and my value is determined by me, not by my past. He visualized receiving larger sums. He felt the feeling of financial ease. Within months, opportunities came that he had never noticed before. His income doubled, then tripled. The outer world rearranged itself to match his inner change. This is not magic, this is law, the law of mind. Your outer conditions are always seeking to align with your inner assumptions. Change the assumption, and the condition must follow. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen in the way you expect, but it will happen, as surely as the oak is in the acorn. Your subconscious mind is working right now, even as you listen to these words. It is working while you sleep. It is working while you eat, while you walk, while you speak. It never rests. The question is, what instructions have you given it? What dominant thoughts occupy your awareness? These are the orders it is fulfilling with absolute precision. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge whether these orders are good for you or bad for you. It doesn't evaluate whether they'll bring you happiness or misery. It simply accepts and executes. If you constantly say, I can't afford this, your subconscious accepts that as instruction and creates circumstances that validate it. If you say, I'm always tired, it will manifest that tiredness in your body regardless of how much sleep you get. This is why we must become vigilant observers of our own thoughts. Not to judge ourselves harshly, but to recognize what we're actually commanding our deeper mind to do. You wouldn't hire an employee and give them contradictory instructions all day, then wonder why nothing gets accomplished. Yet this is precisely what most people do with the most powerful force at their disposal. I've witnessed this principle operate in countless lives. A woman came to me once, constantly complaining that she never had enough money. Every conversation circled back to her poverty, her lack, her struggle. Dr. Murphy, she would say, I work so hard but I'm always broke. I asked her to keep a journal for 1 week, writing down every statement she made about money. When she returned, she was astonished. 47 times in 7 days she had declared her poverty as fact. 47 direct orders to her subconscious mind to maintain the condition of lack. We changed her inner dialogue. Instead of, I'm always broke, she began affirming, money flows to me easily and naturally. At first, She felt foolish saying it. But it's not true, she protested. I reminded her that her previous statement wasn't serving her either, so why not choose words that would? Within 3 months, she received an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she barely knew existed. Within 6 months, she had started a small business that began generating steady income. The outer world had merely rearranged itself to match her new inner instructions. This isn't magic, it's law. The law of mind in action. Your subconscious is utterly impersonal. Like the soil that grows whatever seeds you plant. It will grow nightshade as readily as roses. It doesn't care, it only responds. This indifference of the subconscious is perhaps the most important truth you can grasp. Your subconscious mind doesn't judge the quality of your thoughts. It doesn't evaluate whether your beliefs serve you or destroy you. It simply accepts what you impress upon it with feeling and conviction. If you continuously tell yourself, "I'm always unlucky," your subconscious accepts this as instruction and proceeds to create circumstances that validate this belief. It brings to pass what you have decreed. I've seen this principle demonstrated thousands of times. A woman once came to me convinced she would never find meaningful work. "Every interview I go to," she said, "I just know they won't hire me." Notice her language. She knew times they wouldn't hire me. This wasn't casual doubt, this was conviction. Her subconscious mind, ever faithful to her dominant thoughts, ensured that she walked into every interview radiating uncertainty and defeat. Her body language communicated rejection before she spoke a word. And naturally, she was rejected, time and again. When she finally understood this principle, she began to change her inner conversation. Before sleep each night, she imagined herself working joyfully, feeling appreciated, receiving her paycheck with gratitude. She impressed upon her subconscious the feeling of already being employed in work she loved. Within 3 weeks, an opportunity came through a channel she hadn't even considered. She wasn't hired through the standard interviews that had rejected her. Instead, a friend of a friend mentioned her skills to someone who needed exactly what she could offer. Your subconscious has access to infinite intelligence. It knows paths and possibilities your conscious mind cannot see. But it requires clear direction. It requires belief. Most importantly, it requires you to stop sabotaging it with contradictory thoughts and feelings. Think of your relationship with your subconscious as a sacred partnership. Your conscious mind is the gardener. Your subconscious is the garden itself. The gardener decides what to plant, but the garden does the growing. A wise gardener doesn't plant tomatoes and then complain when tomatoes appear. Yet this is exactly what most people do mentally. They plant thoughts of limitation and then wonder why abundance doesn't bloom in their lives. The universe doesn't argue with your mental garden. It simply says, yes, and so it is. When you plant fear, you harvest fear. When you plant doubt, you harvest doubt. But when you plant faith, when you plant expectation of good, when you plant the certainty that your desires are already taking form in the invisible realm, then you harvest miracles. I want you to understand something profound. Your subconscious mind is the most fertile soil in existence. It will grow anything you plant there. It doesn't discriminate between a thought that serves you and a thought that destroys you. It simply accepts and reproduces. This is why you must become vigilant, not anxious, but watchful of what you're allowing to take root. Think about the people who constantly say, "I never get the good opportunities." Things like that don't happen to people like me. Do you see what they're doing? They're planting seeds of exclusion, of separation from good, and their subconscious mind, being the faithful servant that it is, creates experiences that match those seeds. They walk right past opportunities because their inner eye is blind to them. The opportunity could be standing there waving a flag, but they won't see it because they've conditioned themselves to be invisible to blessings. Now contrast this with someone who affirms, "I am always in the right place at the right time. Good flows to me easily and naturally." This person has planted different seeds entirely. Their subconscious mind begins to work overtime, arranging circumstances, drawing attention to possibilities, creating what we call coincidences, though there are no coincidences, only the law working perfectly. Let me tell you about a woman who came to one of my lectures years ago. She was struggling financially, working 2 jobs, exhausted beyond measure. She told me, "Dr. Murphy, I've tried everything. I work harder than anyone I know, but I can't get ahead." I asked her a simple question. "What do you say to yourself about money?" She looked puzzled at first, then admitted, I always say I have to work myself to the bone just to survive. That's just reality. I stopped her right there. That's not reality, I said. That's your accepted belief, and your belief is creating your reality. We worked together on changing her inner dialogue. Instead of I have to work myself to the bone, she began to affirm, money comes to me easily through expected and unexpected channels. I am open to prosperity from all directions. The change didn't happen overnight, but it happened. Within 3 months, she received a job offer that paid more than both her jobs combined. Within a year, she started a small business that flourished beyond her expectations. The same universe, the same economy, the same world but a different inner garden, and therefore a different harvest. The garden metaphor reveals something crucial that most people miss entirely. They think changing their harvest means working harder on the outside, longer hours, more strategies, different tactics. But you don't change a harvest by yelling at the crops. You don't transform an apple tree into an orange tree by painting the apples orange. You change the harvest by changing what you plant. And planting happens in consciousness first. Always. I knew a man who struggled with relationships his entire adult life. Every partnership ended the same way, with him feeling abandoned, betrayed, unappreciated. He would tell me, Joseph, I keep attracting the wrong people. Why do these things always happen to me? Notice the language, happen to me. As if he were a passive victim of random relationship disasters. When we examined his inner garden, we discovered what he'd been planting all along. Deep in his subconscious, rooted in childhood experiences, was a core belief. People I love always leave me. This wasn't just a thought, it was a seed planted so deep, watered so consistently, that it had become the dominant crop of his consciousness. And the harvest? Relationship after relationship that confirmed this belief? The universe wasn't punishing him. Life wasn't conspiring against him. He was simply reaping what he had sown in the invisible garden of his mind. Here's what changed everything for him. Instead of trying to control how others behaved, instead of creating elaborate strategies to prevent abandonment, he began to change his inner planting. Every day, he would sit quietly and plant a new seed. I am worthy of lasting love. Healthy relationships flow naturally to me. I attract people who value and cherish me. And I want you to notice what happened not overnight, but gradually. The first shift was internal. Marcus stopped scanning every conversation for signs of rejection. He stopped bracing himself for abandonment. His nervous system, which had been stuck in fight or flight mode for years, began to settle. Then the external world began to mirror this inner transformation. An old friend reached out unexpectedly, suggesting they reconnect. Marcus accepted, but this time, he didn't overextend himself trying to prove his worth. He showed up as himself, relaxed and honest, and the friendship deepened naturally. A few months later, he met someone new. Not through desperation or strategy, but through genuine alignment. And when the old patterns tried to resurface, the urge to text constantly, to seek reassurance, to make himself smaller, he paused. He returned to his seed. I am worthy of lasting love. And slowly, he learned to trust both himself and the process. This is the precise mechanism through which your subconscious reshapes your relationships. You're not manipulating others. You're not performing or pretending. You're dissolving the distorted beliefs that have been sabotaging your connections from within. And as those beliefs transform, your energy shifts. Your behavior shifts. The people you attract shift. The dynamics you create shift. Now let me address something crucial that often gets overlooked. Sometimes, when you begin this inner work, certain relationships will naturally fall away. And this can feel like failure. It can feel like your affirmations aren't working, but I want to reframe this for you entirely. When you raise your internal standard, when you reprogram your subconscious to accept only healthy, respectful, genuine connection, relationships built on the old foundation cannot survive. And that's not a bug, that's a feature. If someone was in your life because you were playing small, because you were over-functioning, because you were accepting crumbs when you stopped doing those things, they may leave. And your conscious mind might panic, but your subconscious knows the truth. That space needed to clear so something real could enter. Your subconscious mind doesn't mourn what was never meant for you. It celebrates the clearing. It sees what you can't yet see, the person who will meet you where you are. the opportunity that matches your new frequency, the version of life that was always waiting for you to believe you deserved it. And here's something that might surprise you. The feeling of loss you're experiencing, that's not your subconscious talking, that's your ego. Your ego mourns what was familiar. Your ego grieves the identity you had, the helper, the patient one, the person who could tolerate anything. Your subconscious, it's already moved on. It's already building the new reality. So when you feel that grief, that fear, that, did I make a mistake? Pause. Ask yourself, is this my deeper knowing speaking? Or is this just my comfort zone screaming? Because there's a massive difference between intuition and attachment. Intuition moves you forward. Attachment keeps you circling the same tired patterns. I want to talk about resistance for a moment. Because as you rise, as your subconscious gets reprogrammed, as your external world starts shifting, you're going to hit pockets of resistance. Days where it feels like nothing's working. Days where the old thoughts come flooding back. Days where you're tempted to return to who you used to be, because at least that version was predictable. This is normal. This is part of the process. Your subconscious is doing deep work, and sometimes that work stirs up everything that was buried. Old fears, old beliefs, old versions of yourself that don't want to die. They will fight. They will try to convince you that change is dangerous, that you should go back, that you were fine the way you were. But you weren't fine. You were surviving. You were waiting. You were half alive. And now you're waking up. And waking up is uncomfortable. It requires you to see things you ignored, to admit truths you avoided, to release people and situations you've been clinging to out of fear. The resistance you feel isn't evidence that you're on the wrong path. It's evidence that you're on the right one. It means something real is shifting. Your subconscious doesn't resist change because it hates you. It resists because its entire job for your whole life has been to keep you safe. And safe, to your subconscious, means familiar, even if familiar is painful, even if familiar is limiting, even if familiar is slowly crushing the life out of you. This is why people stay in jobs they despise, why they remain in relationships that drain them, why they keep replaying the same self-destructive patterns year after year, not because they're weak, not because they lack willpower, but because their subconscious has cataloged those patterns as safe simply because they're known. When you begin to visualize a different reality, you're essentially telling your subconscious, everything you've worked so hard to maintain, we're dismantling it. No wonder there's pushback. But here's what changes everything. The subconscious, despite its resistance to change, is also infinitely malleable. It's simultaneously the most stubborn and the most adaptable part of you. It's like concrete that never fully hardens. You can always reshape it. You just need to understand the process. The key is repetition paired with emotion. Your subconscious doesn't speak in logic, it speaks in feelings and images. This is why a single traumatic event can create a belief that lasts decades, while 1,000 logical arguments can't dislodge it. The trauma came with intense emotion. The logic doesn't. So when you visualize, you're not just creating pretty mental pictures. You're generating the emotional frequency of your desired reality. You're teaching your subconscious what this new life feels like. And when you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. Your subconscious begins to recognize this new pattern as familiar. The resistance weakens. What felt impossible starts feeling inevitable. Your internal thermostat resets. I've watched this transformation countless times. The person who couldn't imagine speaking in public suddenly volunteers to give presentations. The individual convinced they'd never find love stops searching and simply becomes magnetic. The entrepreneur who visualized success stops sabotaging their own growth. They didn't become different people. They became who they always were beneath the conditioning. They peeled back the layers of limitation and revealed their true capacity. This is your work now. Not to fight the resistance, but to understand it, to thank it, even. Because that discomfort, it's confirmation that you're doing something your subconscious hasn't cataloged yet. You're creating new neural pathways. You're building a new identity. And here's what most people miss. That discomfort is actually a signal that you're expanding. When you feel resistance, when your body tenses up, when your mind starts throwing objections at you, that's not failure. That's growth happening in real time. Think about the first time you drove a car. Your hands were probably white-knuckling the steering wheel. Your shoulders were up by your ears. You were hyper-aware of every single movement, every decision. It felt unnatural, forced, exhausting. But now, you probably drive while drinking coffee, changing the radio station, and thinking about what you're making for dinner. The action that once demanded your full consciousness now happens automatically. That's the journey you're on with your new self-image. Right now, it takes effort. Right now, you have to consciously remind yourself. Right now, it feels like you're playing a role. But repetition changes everything. Your subconscious mind learns through repetition and emotional intensity. Every time you act from your new identity, even when it feels awkward, you're laying down another layer of neural wiring. You're teaching your subconscious that this is who you are now. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need to wait until it feels natural to get results. The results start showing up while you're still in the awkward phase. People respond to your new energy before you even feel fully comfortable with it. Opportunities appear while you're still rehearsing your lines. The universe doesn't wait for you to feel ready, it responds to your committed action. I've watched people land dream jobs while still feeling like imposters. I've seen relationships transform while people were still consciously choosing new responses. I've witnessed businesses take off while the entrepreneur was still giving themselves daily pep talks in the mirror. The feeling follows the action, not the other way around. So when you wake up tomorrow and that old identity tries to reclaim its throne, remember this. You're not trying to force something unnatural. You're excavating something that's always been there. You're not creating a fake version of yourself. You're removing the limitations that covered your true self. The person you're becoming isn't a stranger. It's the you that existed before fear built walls. Before disappointment taught you to play small. Before other people's opinions became louder than your own inner knowing. This inner self doesn't argue with universal laws. It doesn't question whether gravity will work today or whether the sun will rise tomorrow. It operates from a place of complete acceptance of how reality actually functions. And here's what most people miss. Your conscious mind, your everyday thinking self, is meant to be the gardener of this inner landscape, not the dictator. Not the critic, the gardener. A gardener doesn't stand over a seed screaming, "Grow faster." A gardener doesn't dig up the seed every day to check if it's working. A gardener plants with intention, provides the right conditions, then trusts the intelligence of nature to do what nature does. Your subconscious mind is that nature. It's the soil. And your thoughts, your mental images, your emotional states, these are the seeds you're planting every single day, whether you realize it or not. Most people are planting weeds and wondering why they're not harvesting roses. They're feeding their subconscious mind a steady diet of worry, replaying past failures, imagining future disasters, reinforcing limiting beliefs, and then they're genuinely confused when their life reflects those patterns back to them. Let me be direct with you. Your subconscious mind is recording everything. Every thought you think repeatedly, every image you dwell on, every emotion you marinate in, it's all being accepted, impressed, and eventually expressed in your external experience. This isn't punishment, this isn't judgment, this is simply law, the law of mind, the law of consciousness. If you repeatedly think, "I'm not good with money," your subconscious accepts that as instruction. It will then guide your decisions, your actions, your awareness in ways that confirm that belief. Not because it wants you to struggle, but because it's following the blueprint you've given it. If you constantly imagine worst-case scenarios, your subconscious interprets that as desire. Remember, it doesn't judge. It doesn't say, "Oh, they're just worrying, they don't actually want this." No. It receives the emotional charge, the vivid imagery, the repetition, and it begins orchestrating circumstances that match that frequency. This is why worry is prayer for what you don't want. You're using the exact same creative mechanism, just in reverse. And let me tell you something else that most people miss entirely. Your subconscious doesn't just respond to what you consciously think about. It's also constantly absorbing the emotional atmosphere you marinate in throughout your day, the conversations you have, the news you consume, the people you spend time with, the internal dialogue that runs like background music in your mind. If you're spending hours scrolling through tragedy, outrage, and fear, even if you think you're just staying informed, your subconscious is drinking that in. It doesn't distinguish between what's happening to you directly and what you're emotionally participating in through a screen. Fear is fear. Anxiety is anxiety. And your subconscious begins to create from that emotional baseline. This is why the company you keep matters so profoundly. Not because other people have power over you, but because their dominant mental atmosphere influences yours. If you're constantly around people who complain, who see obstacles everywhere, who traffic in doubt and limitation that becomes the water you're swimming in, and unless you're extremely vigilant, you'll start breathing it in without even realizing it. But the opposite is equally true. Surround yourself with faith, with possibility, with people who expect good things, and that atmosphere begins to permeate your consciousness. Not through force, but through osmosis, through resonance. This is the principle behind mentorship, behind mastermind groups, behind why certain environments seem to breed success while others breed stagnation. It's not magic, it's mental atmosphere. It's the dominant vibration of thought and feeling that permeates a space. Now here's where this gets deeply practical. You can become the architect of your own mental atmosphere. You don't have to wait for circumstances to change before you feel differently. You can deliberately cultivate the inner climate that matches your desired outcome. This is what prayer really is, not begging an external deity for favors, but deliberately tuning your consciousness to the frequency of your answered prayer, feeling the reality of it now, before the physical evidence appears. This is why gratitude is such a powerful spiritual practice. When you give thanks for something before you see it manifest, you're affirming its reality in consciousness. You're living from the end. You're dwelling in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. I've witnessed countless individuals transform their circumstances simply by shifting from a consciousness of lack to a consciousness of abundance. A businessman who was struggling told me he began each day by feeling wealthy, by assuming the feeling of financial freedom. He didn't deny his current circumstances, but he refused to let them define his inner state. Within months, opportunities he never imagined possible began appearing. His outer world rearranged itself to match his inner conviction. This isn't wishful thinking or positive affirmations repeated mechanically. It's a deep, felt sense of already being what you wish to become. It's imagination wedded to feeling, and this combination is the creative force that moves mountains. Your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and an actual one. When you imagine something with sufficient emotional intensity and sensory detail, your subconscious accepts it as real and begins to manifest conditions that correspond to that inner picture. This is the secret that mystics throughout the ages have taught in various forms. Change your concept of yourself, and you automatically change your world. Alter your inner conversations, and you alter your outer circumstances. Every night before sleep is a golden opportunity. Your conscious mind becomes less dominant, and your subconscious becomes more receptive. If you fall asleep feeling successful, healthy, and loved, you're impressing these states upon your subconscious. You're planting seeds in the most fertile soil. Conversely, if you fall asleep worried, resentful, or fearful, you're also planting seeds but of a different harvest. Your subconscious doesn't judge or argue. It simply accepts what you impress upon it and works tirelessly to bring it into manifestation. You are the gardener of your own consciousness. What are you planting? What are you watering with your attention and emotion? You see, the garden doesn't judge what you plant. It simply produces. If you plant seeds of worry, you'll harvest anxiety. If you plant seeds of resentment, you'll harvest bitterness. But if you plant seeds of faith, of love, of abundance, of health, that's exactly what will grow in the garden of your life. And here's something most people never realize. You don't have to wait until the garden is perfect to start planting new seeds. You don't have to completely clear out all the weeds before you begin cultivating something beautiful. You can start right now, today, this very moment. Every time you redirect a negative thought, you're pulling a weed. Every time you affirm something positive, you're planting a seed. Every time you visualize your ideal life with feeling, you're watering those seeds. Every time you give thanks, you're providing sunlight to help them grow. The transformation doesn't happen all at once. You don't plant a seed today and have a tree tomorrow, but the process begins immediately. The moment you change your inner conversation, the moment you shift your mental diet, the subconscious begins working on the new blueprint. I've seen people transform their entire lives in a matter of months simply by becoming aware of what they were mentally consuming. They stopped feeding their minds with negative news all day long. They stopped rehearsing past failures. They stopped participating in conversations that dragged them down. Instead, they began a new practice. Morning and evening, they would sit quietly and impress upon their subconscious mind the life they wanted to live. They would see it, feel it, accept it as already accomplished, and throughout the day, whenever the old patterns tried to reassert themselves, they would gently but firmly redirect their thoughts. This is not suppression. This is not denial. This is conscious, deliberate cultivation. Think of it this way. If you owned a radio station, you wouldn't broadcast programs you didn't want people to hear, would you? Your mind is broadcasting all day long, and your subconscious is the most loyal listener you'll ever have. It believes every word. It accepts every image. It acts on every feeling. So, broadcast wisely. Your subconscious never argues. It never says, "That's not true," or "I don't believe you." It simply takes your word for it. It's like a faithful servant who carries out every order you give, whether that order builds you up or tears you down. So if you constantly tell yourself, "I'm always broke," your subconscious says, "Okay, that's the truth," and it gets to work making it so. If you say, "I never get lucky," it accepts that as fact and arranges your circumstances accordingly. It doesn't question. It doesn't judge. It just obeys. That's why your self-talk matters more than almost anything else in your life. You are programming yourself every single day with the words you speak to yourself about yourself. You are the chief programmer of your own mind. And most people are programming themselves for failure without even realizing it. I've met men and women who had every advantage, education, connections, opportunity, and yet they lived in quiet desperation because they kept telling themselves stories of limitation. And I've met others who started with nothing, absolutely nothing, but they whispered to themselves daily, "I am capable, I am growing, I am becoming," and they rose. The difference wasn't in their circumstances, it was in the broadcast. Now, here's what I want you to understand deeply. Your subconscious is always listening. There's no off switch. Even when you're not paying attention, it is. It's listening when you're driving. It's listening when you're falling asleep. It's listening in those quiet moments when you think you're just daydreaming. And it's recording everything. Every worry you rehearse, every doubt you entertain, every fear you feed. It's all being written into the fabric of your inner world. And what's written within will eventually be expressed without. This is why before you sleep at night, you must be especially careful about what you dwell upon, because the moments before sleep are like an open door to the subconscious. In that drowsy, relaxed state, your conscious mind steps aside, and whatever you impress upon your subconscious in those final moments sinks deep. If you fall asleep worrying about bills, you're seeding worry. If you fall asleep replaying an argument, you're seeding conflict. But if you fall asleep feeling grateful, imagining your wish fulfilled, dwelling in the feeling of your answered prayer, you're seeding miracles. That's not poetry. That's mechanics.